Hey guys, welcome back to Comics in the Captain's Quarters. And now we are on issue 4, which is actually 4 of 6 in this 6-issue mini-series. And you can see it's dated May of 88. And although it's issue 4, in reality, it's the second part of a 4-part story arc, basically. So this is actually part 2, a continuation of our story from last month's issue. Once again, we have a dynamic cover here. We've got Tasha Yar being attacked by some unknown assailant. You see he's ripped part of her uniform off. It's pretty exciting. You know, the thing about comic book art is oftentimes the art on a cover is exaggerated. You know, sometimes you don't really see exactly on the cover what's going to be happening in the story. But in this case, it's pretty good. Now, this is a very interesting continuation of our story, as you'll see. And it's called Q's Day. So, if you remember right, when last we left the Star Drive section, Picard was freaking out because he realized that the main dish has disappeared. The saucer section with all the civilians aboard is gone. So that's not a good situation. He blames Q, but Q claims he has nothing to do with it. He has no idea what Picard's talking about. He doesn't know where the saucer section is. Neither the Federation nor these mysterious people from the other ship are too pleased with Q, because apparently Q was trying to bait both of them to attack each other. So he basically lied to them, you know. So Q's not in a good place right now. But Q claims that the saucer section is out of his control. He doesn't know where the saucer section is. But he does say in this panel that although 4 people were beamed aboard the mysterious ship, that actually there were 5 people aboard that ship, and Q surmises that the 5th person has somehow beamed aboard the saucer section and commandeered it, which is what we actually did see in the last episode. But Worf doesn't believe him. So, of course, Worf and him go at it, and because Q is an omnipotent godlike being, Q instantly uses his powers against Worf, blasts him, and freezes him, just like he froze that one officer in Encounter at Farpoint. So, of course, that gives Picard the raving needle. So Picard's all upset. He didn't believe Q's story. He thinks Q has something to do with it too, but Q maintains that he's innocent. But Picard thinks you could drive a coach and 6 through his story. And meanwhile, aboard the saucer section, it has been basically trapped in this force. The whole saucer section is vibrating violently. And as far as Riker can tell, who, if you remember, is now commander of the saucer section, he's in charge of protecting the civilians aboard. As far as Riker can tell, he calls this some sort of anti-space, because even he doesn't know exactly where they are or what's happening, but the ship is vibrating violently. So they suggest Troy try and tune in to figure out what's going on. But to my dismay, if you remember in the first comic, these 2 characters are back again, the Bickleys. Remember this married couple that the comic created specifically for this book? They never did appear on the show, but here's this married couple who are always fighting, and this issue is no exception. They're fighting as it is. To complicate matters, aboard the bridge, well, Deanna's trying to tune in to figure out what's going on, why is the ship vibrating, what's got them. It's just a mess, basically, on both ships, but for different reasons. So Riker decides to check in on the civilians, and they're doing all right, but for example, this one woman is worried about her husband, who's back on the Star Drive section, and she doesn't know if the Star Drive section is at war, or being attacked, or when can she speak to her husband again. Of course, the officers have no clue, because they don't know. You know, as far as they know, they're just stuck here in the saucer section, and the whole thing is vibrating, the whole ship. Wesley, as true to his character, is a busybody and a bit of a know-it-all, and he wants to get involved, so he heads off to the bridge to see if he can help in some way. And meanwhile, in sickbay, this poor night nurse is coping with Tasha Yar, who is still completely delirious. She's freaking out because, you know, she's being stalked by this mysterious entity from her past when she was in the colony, and that she's been found, she's being hunted, you know, and she's just freaking out. And as the night nurse goes to attend to Tasha, he trips over something, which turns out to be a cloaking device that belongs to this figure, this one who boarded the saucer section mysteriously from that weird ship. And he claims that he's from Tasha's past. His name is either Reglech. I'm going to say Reglech. I'm going to call him Reglech. But he is from Tasha's past. He's apparently fancied Tasha since her days in the colony, and he has been stalking her. And of course, she's freaking out that she's been found, and, you know, she doesn't want to deal with this guy. But he claims to, you know, have wanted to help her all those years ago. But meanwhile, back in the Star Drive section, if you remember, Q used his powers to freeze Worf, but suddenly, to Q's dismay, Worf starts to thaw out, as if Q has somehow mysteriously lost his powers. And this is one of the weird things about this comic, because, I mean, when did it, I think it's Stardate 42 something? Let's just see. Yep. There's the Stardate right there. 42128.3. So this would have taken place, if it was canon, in the second season. But in the third season of the show, Q really does lose his powers. So it's interesting that, you know, we see Q lose his powers first here in the comic before it actually showed up canonically on the show in the third season. But anyway, Q has apparently been drained of his powers. So, Picard, taking advantage of that, seeing that Worf's now thawed out, Picard uses some good old-fashioned cowboy diplomacy and smacks Q right in the face, because now Q is just as human as the rest of the crew. So that's weird. We don't know why Q is suddenly human. We can assume he's been stripped of his powers by his superiors for some reason. But we continue. Back in the saucer section, we have the Bickleys fighting, and just then Wesley comes onto the bridge, and he says, "Oh, I want to be a help." And, you know, oddly enough, Riker takes advantage of the situation, saying, "Yes, Wes, you came at a great time. You can help out by taking over for Mr. Bickley at Ops, you know." So Mr. Bickley's dismissed, and Wesley takes the Ops position at this point. And meanwhile, down in sickbay, Beverly lets the bridge know that Tasha's gone. They don't know where she is, that the night nurse has been found unconscious. There's been some sort of altercation. And while Riker's getting this news, to his astonishment, on the bridge of the saucer section appears a whole load of Qs. Qs all over the place. And these are, they figure, Q's superiors. And they've appeared, which makes sense because Q has lost his powers aboard the Star Drive section. So now we may have answers from the superiors. Meanwhile, Tasha's talking to this fellow about her past in the colonies, and that her youth was so bad, and she spent most of the time hiding and running and screaming, and he apparently tried to protect her, but she still didn't want anything to do with him. All she did was scream in his face, too, but he's always fancied her, basically, so he's basically come for her, just as she surmised that she was being stalked by this guy. But anyway, through resolution and, fear, perhaps, she just lays into him. She just kicks him straight in the stomach and knocks him down and out, basically. She wants nothing to do with this guy. She wants him finished and done. And she says she's no longer part of that colony. She's moved on from her past. Her childhood was horrible, but now she's, in the Federation. And basically, she wants this guy under arrest, Federation arrest for stalking and what have you. So that's what becomes of him, apparently. Meanwhile, back in the saucer section, these superiors of Q explain that this has been a test for Q, and Q didn't handle it well. That's why they stripped Q of his powers. They claim because Sasha has such willpower and strength of character that she's proven that the human race doesn't need to be on trial, as Q is wont to do, and that basically Tasha has proven that the human race can do just fine, and that Q was kind of out of line putting them in trial again, like he did at Encounter at Farpoint. So once they explain themselves, the entities, Q's superiors, vanish, of course. And meanwhile, Q himself, again being stripped of his powers, tries to grab Geordi's phaser, which he manages to get. He grabs Geordi's phaser because he has no powers now, of course. But the saucer section and the Star Drive section are reunited, thanks to Q's superiors, bringing everything back together again. But Q, not wanting to be human, basically decides to kill himself. He can't spend the rest of his life without his godlike Q powers. So using the phaser, he puts it up against his head and threatens to commit suicide. And of course, Picard tackles him to prevent that from happening, just as he pulls the trigger, and lo and behold, Q accidentally blasts Geordi right in the chest with a phaser, knocking him right down. Now, this is weird because Data immediately, flies into a rage, which shouldn't happen, because Data experiences no emotion. Not this early anyway. He's got no emotion chip. It was very early. This is only season 2. But like I said, in these comics, oftentimes characters act out of character because they haven't been properly developed or what have you yet. And of course, like I said, this comic isn't really canon anyway, but it's really interesting to see Geordi's best friend, Data, flare up like this in anger at Q for, accidentally, albeit, blasting Geordi with a phaser. So, once again, we're left on a bit of a cliffhanger here because the story is continued in the next issue. But it's a really good comic. All things considered, there's always something happening. It's not a boring read, that's for sure. But here we have, like I said, issue 4 of the 6-part miniseries. It's the second comic in a story arc. And soon we'll find out what happened to Geordi in the next issue. Same Star Trek channel, same Star Trek time. And you often hear channels say, like, subscribe, comment. I really don't like that. I get tired of hearing it. You've heard it all in videos before. You know that if you like the video, it's going to help with the algorithm. So I'm only going to say it probably this video, maybe in one of my Federation Figure Fridays. But I'm going to say it now, and I probably won't say it again if I ever review comics, because you guys know the drill. But like the video, favorite it, share it with your friends, comment below if you have the comic or you're interested in getting this comic in some way. Whatever you want, just interact with the video. And we will see more comics in the captain's quarters. So, come back next time, crew. Let's find out what happened to Geordi.